Mayor Plummer,
Yes.
Commissioner Brooks,
Here.
Commissioner Roberts,
Here.
Commissioner Galbraith,
Here.
Commissioner Gibson.
Here.
We have a quorum and ready for the transaction of business.
Okay.
Now, where we want to start, so.
Yeah. So last time, you all had some questions, and I think we went out and did our best to get the answers to, to get the answers to those, sent those to you. You'd asked for a couple alternatives to look at for an order to address this going forward, and so I prepared those, and you could borrow from each or accept some of each or both with that. But I think maybe there were some other questions that folks had, so we can try to answer those.
Go ahead.
No, sir. You
No,
go.
no,
No. You go. Go. You're fine.
You got it. I'm stubborn.
Okay, because my questions, I mean, there's to a specific person, so are yours for like to Brad and Aaron or what? So you may have some of the same things that I want to ask.
Whatever, yeah, they've given me.
Okay,
So what was your question? I'm sorry.
okay. So mine are pretty much directed at asking Ms. Morton
Okay.
for clarification on some things.
Okay.
Okay. So,
Aaron,
Aaron,
we got a.
We have-
speaker for her, because I like to
okay.
be able to hear her clearly. You're all right, Paul, you're all right.
Yeah, ball's moving.
Still cold feet.
Sometimes I don't hear everything you say, so I just want you up here with a microphone. Okay, all right.
Okay, so, did you receive, did you receive like written or verbal approval from Darren and or Mike?
So, we had a break in cases.
Okay.
And then the federal policy expired. And
Right.
so we had an employee approach me that had COVID and her time in his sick time. And I didn't have the answer. I said, well, we don't have, the COVID policy has expired, and so I sent an email.
Right, the email that said pay her, not.
Pay her. And so there was a very lengthy conversation that followed that, and I was instructed to continue the federal policy, and it should have come down the hall.
Okay.
But I did as I was told, and I tried to continue to follow the federal policy as I was told.
Okay, so who approved it? Mike left December 30, 2021. So who approved it after that? Because we're January to May 2022. So who,
I just
Approved
continued
it.
to follow the policy. I didn't.
It wasn't the policy, right? Had
The
not been
federal-
adopted
Correct. There was
by
no
this
law.
body.
Correct.
okay, so no one here from January to May said it was, okay. Okay, so, Brad identified employees, because what he sent, he identified police and fire in the amount of $14,480. So what do we need to do with that?
Well, no, what I kind of had emailed out yesterday, or Tuesday, you guys had gotten an email that basically had broken down kind of the employees as far as gross payroll, payroll taxes, and KRS contributions. And that total came out to $87,980
Correct.
for a combined. From what I've kind of done some research on in some different cities that had continued the policies, there were basically what they had done is taken what the 2-week equivalent would be. So for fire, it would be 96 hours.
Mhm.
For police, it would be 84 hours.
Correct.
So extend, and then full or part-time people, if they work 20 hours weekly, which would be a 40-hour week, or for 2 weeks, then they would be entitled to 40 hours pay. And I don't know as
Okay.
far as part-time employees go that are on this list. But what I did, so identifying who were police and fire, from the hours that they had and kind of going back through calculate, if we do look at doing extending out 96 hours to fire and police or making the police 84 hours, then that could potentially add another 14,000 onto the 87,000. So it obviously would probably, it's gonna take some time to maybe reconcile and see if some of the people that were at 80 hours could go up over,
Another 16 hours.
yeah, another 16 hours. So, but I wanted to at least have you guys know that there's a potential another 14 to 15,000.
Okay, so that puts us over 100,000, pretty much.
Right around
100
there.
and, okay.
Yeah.
In your training with KLC, what was the consensus of cities in Kentucky? What were they doing?
It was about 50-50. Actually, we talked about it at the Kepler conference, this past week. There's probably about 25% that are still offering. It's the larger cities though.
Like Jefferson and, okay.
Bowling
Well, no,
Green,
that article I had said Jefferson had cut it off.
Jefferson doesn't attend.
Yeah.
hours there. I know Bowling Green, there were a few cities that are still kind of doing what we did is one time, not multiple times.
And so how many trainings did you take with KLC over the past year about this?
Did more with the Hannah Resource Group. They did one, once a month. But they're not local government. And then KLC did the bulletins.
So during the Hannah Group monthly trainings, was their implementation of a policy or anything during those?
They weren't specific to municipalities.
Okay.
So it was more, there's a lot more than just this
Okay.
one policy and
Okay.
things. And I can provide those
Okay.
training records to show that. And I just,
Okay. And sorry, these are all directed to
It's
you,
okay.
but there was so much that went out. I feel the questions need to be asked to you also. So who is responsible for implementation and who was responsible for making the determination on which employees were eligible for COVID pay? Like who helped you with that, or was it just you?
it was myself and the department heads because
Okay.
we made sure that every person had a positive test
Mhm.
result or a required quarantine in the beginning from the health department.
Okay.
They had to have one or the other.
And all that's in their files.
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely.
So in the spreadsheets, that we had a lot of stuff come to us. We had some employees identified for receiving more than 80 hours of COVID pay, but their work-based schedule would only qualify them for the 80 hours. So who determined that they would get over that?
The department heads would approve their time.
So the department heads to
I
approve,
never approved time for the pay periods except
Okay.
for, salary
Did
employees.
you check that though to make sure that they only had 80?
I don't do the individual employees. That's the department heads. I do the individual
But
weekly
did,
approval.
I guess, did
No, what
the
I'm-
department heads go through training to know that for COVID, they were only allowed to have
80 hours.
It wasn't limited to 80 hours, it was their scheduled 2 weeks according to the FFCR. It wasn't, the federal policy wasn't 80 hours, it was your 2-week schedule. The federal policy didn't say 80 hours, the federal policy was, you get paid, you're scheduled for 84 hours in 2 weeks. Your regular schedule is what the policy was.
And I'm sorry, I don't have that in front of me, Brad. Was there a few employees though that did go over their 80? I thought there were that were not in,
Yeah, there were
84, 96-hour work weeks.
Well, yeah, I guess that kind of confuses me because everybody on your list, Aaron, that you provided around April 20th, everybody's capped at 80 hours. There's 2 individuals that did exceed the 80-hour limit. One of them is in the police department that received 96 hours of the COVID pay, and then there's one that's, I'm not sure which department, but they're not a police or fire, that received 88 hours of COVID pay, kind of related to, I think it was your April 20th email. So, yeah, response on April 20th, you provided a list that had everybody that has been charged COVID hours and their hours. But there's really nobody that goes, as what you've kind of just said, nobody really goes over the 80-hour limit. Everybody's pretty much capped at 80, except for those two
Yeah.
individuals.
Is
Is
that the
that-
report from Kronos or the report, the spreadsheet?
Well, that's my question,
Because
because,
the report from Kronos would be the most accurate. This was me tracking, that's my spreadsheet. So Kronos would be the more accurate of what hours were.
You got,
I
you got,
just didn't know.
That's fine.
I think that's what everybody was referring to.
Yeah.
I'm referring
it takes
to
forever.
that, which was 80 hours, so is
And I
that
guess
not
my
correct
thing,
now?
with this being such a specific item, whose job was it to track and make sure that we were not going over the allotted time that the federal government
I
suggested?
tried the absolute, that's why I kept this long spreadsheet, was to make sure that someone didn't, you know, we had employees that, I mean, you'll see on here, they'll be listed that they have 0 hours. It's because they're either already on the report, they couldn't provide a test or quarantine certificate, or, you know, that they had already used their time. There's two employees that had 3 different exposures and positive tests, and so they used sick time. So I did my very best to make sure that I went back and looked at the original dates, how many hours they got the first time, to make sure they didn't get it the second time. I did try to track to make sure nobody went over.
And those just kind of got, I guess, those two just kind of got,
I
you
mean,
didn't catch those two?
I don't know who they are, so I don't know if their schedule was different. I'd have to know who they are to be able to answer.
Oh, yeah, we're not
without-
doing names, but-
with absolute certainty. I don't wanna speculate, you know, I don't know who they are.
Thank you.
so, because in your April 20th email, you said you're working on the reporting from Kronos.
And then I sent that over,
So have you been working on changing Kronos over the last couple of weeks, or is the Kronos the as of those days? That, I guess, basically the pay periods of it.
because all this time went in under the pay code emergency pay,
Okay.
or emergency management. It was tracked under a different pay code, and I sent that report to you. I have to look.
Yeah, you sent that to me on May 2nd.
That's the only thing I can't go back in Kronos and change. Once it's locked, it's locked. So there's no going back and changing.
Okay, I have one last question for you. Thank you. So I know where I work, we were inundated with emails and all types of things about COVID and still are getting stuff. So did you email out correspondence to the employees so they know procedures, eligibility and all that? Like, did staff get anything?
Yeah, I know that there were quite a few communications. We had a COVID task force that helped with that in the beginning. I know that there were some tax notifications, because there was a point where employees could defer their taxes, and we had to communicate that out.
Specifically though towards this policy?
Yeah,
Um,
like they knew it was ending, when it was ending, things like that.
I don't believe so.
Okay. Because I know we didn't receive anything from you on any of it, so
If
yeah.
I had sent it out, it would have, no, you all would have been copied on it.
Okay.
Refresh my memory, what was the COVID task force?
The task force was volunteers from different departments to help us decide on procedures to keep people safe, what policies, how we communicated those policies.
And you all met on a regular basis?
Yes, in the beginning, we absolutely did.
Okay. So we still, the only documentation we have is the one where Mr. Withrow, who's no longer with us, basically said for you to pay one employee, not all. That's all we have.
That's in writing, yes.
Okay.
And there was no discussion when, I guess, the alleged meeting between you, Mike, and the former city manager, there's no documentation, but there was no discussion on when this was gonna end, when would be a good time for the actual commission to do a policy? I mean, so you're up to date though on the KLC statutes of a city manager form of government. So you know when policies are supposed to be made and when they're not. So did it ever occur to you that this should have been a policy decision for the commission?
Should have. I went to my supervisor and he and I both failed to bring it, and we should have.
But I mean, in retrospect, Mr. Withrow left the end of December, so you still didn't come to anyone. Or, I mean, did you go to the mayor or?
Right, I just continue to follow
Okay.
what I've been doing.
Because I know, I mean, just with what I pulled, I mean, there was, even January 7th, the new congressional stimulus bill on state and local government. And the key takeaways is the paid leave requirements and framework under the FFCRA will expire at the end of the year. And it guides you on how to talk to supervisors and managers about the expiration of paid leave and next steps. And then this is a whole COVID resource page.
That's KLC.
This is, yeah. KLC.
KLC.
I mean, I'll pass it on. Y'all wanna see it? It's KLC. That was from Andrea. And this other one was from Andrea.
So Brian, you sent us some scenarios there.
I do.
So where do we go? I mean,
Well, you all could adopt one today, or you can tell me which parts of it you want, and I'll clean it up, and you can adopt it Tuesday.
Let's see.
Or if you need more time.
Yeah, I
I'm
need
not
more
saying you have
time.
to do it today
Yeah,
or
well,
Tuesday.
I'm just, that we take more time to look at this.
Yeah.
And then we come back with a recommendation, maybe Tuesday, if everybody get an opportunity to look at this thing. And we'll come back Tuesday and give you some type of direction to go from
Sure.
from here. I mean, I think that would be the thing to do. I think now, I'm speaking for myself. Because I would like to do it well, and then I'm making the suggestion, or mine, is to, Brian sent us 3 scenarios to look at, and that we look at these 3 scenarios and then come back Tuesday with maybe a recommendation for Brian to adopt something for us.
So you all know, on the one draft order I sent you that has the qualifying criteria, I lifted that from the original one we did in March of 2020. So that's not, you're subject to the quarantine, you're advised by your doctor to self-quarantine, all those scenarios, that was in the original. So I certainly didn't try to change the eligibility criteria.
Of that one.
In fact, I made it, if you go that path, I was trying to make it exactly what it was in, going back to March of 20.
That's because that's what you would be ratifying. You would be
It is.
ratifying the same language that expired December the 31st, 20.
Correct. And what I've heard from you all is you may not extend this leave, but if you chose to extend the leave, it was going to be the same exact leave as it has been all
Yes.
along. It wasn't going to
The same
increase
criteria
for
applies.
criteria or for an amount.
Yeah.
So if an employee has already used all this in 2020, they don't get
They
anything
don't
more
get it.
about whatever you all do in the
Correct.
next
Right.
few meetings.
Right.
Well, if we approve it, we're saying we're okay with all of this that went on.
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you got.
And that's what I personally have an issue with, because it's not fair to the employees that went through all of this, and it's definitely not fair to us that nothing was communicated, there was no transparency at all. That's where I have the hard time with this. Because it's a double-edged sword, however we look at it, we're gonna upset
Yeah.
several people
Yeah,
on
somebody's
things
not gonna
that, on things that we had no knowledge of.
Yeah, somebody's not gonna be there.
That's the sad part,
That is correct.
so.
Is it too early to ask what is the pros, cons, just financially wise, or
No, that's a good question, Mayor.
what is the pros and cons?
Well, you want me to get my T accounts out that I had with you the other day?
I just want a brief synopsis. You want to, that's fine.
Well, I mean,
You all had to make
obviously, if you do not approve it, then basically employees will have to, what I'm gonna say is gonna have to absorb this time as personal time. So it's like you and I discussed, if somebody has 100-hour balance of sick time on July 1st, then this 80 hours will now be applied to that, so they'll go down to 20 hours.
Okay.
So moving forward, any sick time would either be, against them, or they would have to build a negative balance,
Okay.
okay?
So what happens
So-
what happens, because there were individuals that they had just started work, they hadn't accumulated time, so what happens, they end up with a negative balance?
I guess we would have to look at the policy
Okay.
that's in the handbook, and Aaron, would you care to answer that one?
I mean, the only thing we could do would be you would accrue and earn your credit back. And we've had individuals that have had extreme circumstances where we have done that on a one-on-one basis,
And that's what I tried to put in the other draft order, was if someone had a negative. I don't know. It may be so long ago that at the time, they didn't have enough, but now they would have built that back up. But yeah, so if somebody has a negative balance, then however many hours they earn this next month would.
It goes from
It
10
goes
to
against
8
the-
to 6 to whatever, however it.
Right. So, and then the other pro con, because I think like you indicated, there's no good situation for
No,
people around this table at all.
so true.
But if you have the employee, let's just say they have 100 hours at July 1st, obviously if you approve this, then the city absorbs that 80 hours. And as of today, they would still have 100 hours of sick time. So basically, we're basically saying we're gonna freeze your accrued sick time by approving this.
And they get credit for COVID.
No.
No.
I mean, the city eats it.
No, yeah, I'm saying, yes.
I mean, technically nobody that's on these lists have been charged sick time.
correct?
No.
It was all put
How
on
are
as
accumulated sick
emergency.
balance?
So right now it is,
Right.
do we want to charge them for it, or are we gonna pay for it?
I just want to make a side note. This is taxpayer dollar. And that's the thing that bothers me the most, is that I feel like this has been a mishandling of taxpayer dollars, because policies were not followed, policies were not able to be, we were not able to make a policy for this. And at the end of the day, the people that contact me and say, so you're telling me my taxpayer dollars went to this? And then I have to try to answer that question. So whatever decision we make, like you all said, it's a double-edged sword. We have employees that just went along with what they were told. But then we're supposed to answer to the people of this city who, who don't quite appreciate it. That things were not that things were not followed that should have been followed. And therefore, they feel that the city is not doing a good job.
Well, my only question, and then it goes back, I guess, is to, I mean, I don't know, it was COVID pay, and would we have approved it had it come down? I mean, that's the question. I mean, are we gonna tell these folks,
Right.
we're not gonna pay them for,
Right.
you know, for COVID, or, so, again,
Exactly.
folks aren't gonna be, you know.
But
you know,
we're trying to
which-
clean it up now
Right,
instead
yeah,
of we
yeah,
should have been able
I
to say to
totally
start
agree
with.
with that, but I mean, you know, it's one, what would we have paid them? You know, that's,
We'll never know,
right, so,
because we weren't at it.
so. So that's my suggestion.
So, all the lists that we have are correct.
But like-
Well, that, I guess, Aaron, that's kind of my question. What list do we need to go by?
You need to go by Chronos.
So the list that was emailed,
Seven.
First list was
Make-
my personal
Spreadsheet.
tracking spreadsheet to know when people brought me. The hours, the Chronos hours are the most accurate. Those are straight from the
Okay.
time approved by the supervisors. I can't adjust them, I can't go back.
okay.
The very first email was my personal spreadsheet.
And so that email, the spreadsheet that you sent on May 2nd,
Yes,
Okay.
that's straight from Chronos. Give me everything that was paid under this pay code. And there may be some hours for the fire department. They use that pay code to track mandatory overtime, so we may have to look at some individuals that may not be on my list that have that pay code, but I know the chief was using that pay code to track other stuff as well.
okay.
So the 88,000 is correct.
What's that?
So that 88,000 right now is correct.
No, it's not correct.
So let me.
Okay, so,
Keep it correct.
real quick,
Let's go.
can we,
Because I've looked at the attachment that was on the Kronos report,
okay,
and from what was on this spreadsheet, from what was emailed to me on April 20th, saying that this is how I've tracked it,
mhm,
the hours on Kronos, some of them don't match up. And I've got a spreadsheet. I was waiting to get clarification on which one we need to go with. So there's more hours on Kronos, I think, when I kind of look at that.
so
But then
we're,
again, everybody's kind of capped at 80.
Right,
Yeah,
so,
Lord.
all right, so the 87,980.52 is not correct.
It's within the ballpark.
Okay, that's,
Plus or minus though.
Say $5,000 here or there.
Okay, plus or minus.
all
Yeah.
right, so,
Okay.
so how hard is it to get a actual spreadsheet?
can we, yeah, an actual.
I've got,
Between the two of you, an actual number that we can.
I've got the Cronus one pretty much converted, but I didn't really feel like comfortable using that one versus this one, so it won't take very long to summarize up what's on that spreadsheet.
That'll work for me.
Okay.
Okay.
Let me ask you a question. 80 hours. Men you talked about, I just want to.
Sure.
Did everybody get the 80 hours? Cool. And did the ones maybe didn't use it, did they still get that 80 hours?
Well, I guess that would depend on how far you extend the policy, because I think if you adopt a policy and say, we're gonna end it, maybe say May 31st, then no, not everybody would get a full 80-hour allotment for COVID pay. Now, obviously, I think there's individual situations where people were out multiple weeks, but then I probably would assume, like, say, on police or fire, depending on how the shift rotations went, that if their shift rotation only required like 2 12-hour shifts in the week, then they probably were only credited 24 hours, and so they would still have 60 hours, kind of available. It kind of depends on how the timing.
But now
Awesome.
that would be just for COVID, like
Right.
if they got it again and they would still have this much.
Yeah.
Just as long as they don't use or get credited for COVID more than the 80 hours or the 84 hours or the 96 hours or whatever.
Right.
Yeah,
But
Right.
some are, so there's one or two on there that are already, one's at 88 and one has already done 96.
Correct. So they're I mean, depending on how you do it, those are maxed out.
Right.
So if
Yeah,
that
there's one
employee
or
was
two.
supposed to only receive 80, then will that extra 8 that they were given actually come back out of their sick leave then? Because they were credited incorrectly?
I would think we need direction from you guys on that.
I would
but
assume that you would.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, because the law was pretty
And if the-
specific back in 80 hours, and then fire department got so many, whatever their shift number is,
96.
it's 96.
And if there's the
So-
one individual that's a police that's received 96, then he'll need to go down to 84.
Yeah, he owes, and he or she owes 12, somebody owes 4, so. But that's, let's say,
That's-
1 or 2 or 3 or whoever it is.
It's a general
versus-
audit correction, I think.
Yeah,
you know,
right.
I don't think anybody would be upset.
Yeah,
No, I mean, I think, yeah, but,
Well, I tell you what, when it comes to my sick, vacation, emergency, and personal, I get really upset because that's my time that I think I've already accumulated and had, and to go back and tell someone, due to a mistake, you're gonna have to do this and do that, that's not, I don't personally think I would be fine with it, but I'm not them.
So do you have the report for 2020 as to what everyone was capped off at?
Chronos would only go back 13 months, it would take me, but I can get it if you want the Chronos numbers, it'll just take me a little while. But I mean, you can, 2020, there were 899 hours.
So it's quite a bit less.
Yes, we didn't have as many positive cases.
Well, I would like to see that.
yeah, just somewhere in this report, I thought I saw, oh, here it is, in 20, there's 931 off this spreadsheet that you sent in April 20,
Okay.
or April 20th, and then 21, we had 2,541 hours, and then in 22, we had 940.
And in 2020, you all did not make a policy then either? Because I was not here then, Angie was not here
No,
then.
no, I mean, we did back in March, whatever, we did have municipal order number,
Yeah.
we did have municipal order concerning leave under the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, and that was where, that was
So you
one
all
that.
did approve that?
Yes, yes, and it expired December 31st of 20. The
Okay.
question to me then has come in, it wasn't ratified sometime in 21, or it wasn't, an extension was not given, didn't come before this body to extend this. But as I said, I think at our last meeting, I think if they had come, I think we probably would have, and I guess the numbers do show that, because it goes from 931 to 2,541 during 21, so. And that's not off Chronos, that's off Aaron's spreadsheets, so.
So why was the policy done in 2020 that expired, but it was not ever talked about again? I mean, again, can't just be Aaron, can't just be Darren, can't just be Mike. I mean, did nobody think about this?
Well, I know the only, I mean, when I go back through and look at everything, obviously this got pushed a lot in 2020.
Right.
And then I think as it was coming into the end of October, maybe first part of November, the only thing that really was looked at or even discussed was extending everybody's vacation time because of all the travel restrictions and,
Yeah,
you
we
know,
did
other
that.
things that nobody had the availability to use any kind of vacation
Right.
time. And I thought at that point in time, the only thing that this commission had voted to extend from December 31st, 2020 was vacation time to
Mhm.
March 31st.
Yeah, Fayette
Um,
County did that.
Yeah, I don't think that necessarily the COVID pay was extended
No.
on that part of it. I thought it kind of really just ended
Yes.
at December 20.
Mhm.
So,
Because again, when you look at Aaron's
And then-
spreadsheet here, there's only early January, and then there wasn't any, so it
Well, and
kinda
that's-
got out of sight, out of mind, or whatever you wanna call it.
I don't, okay, I'm just going.
I mean, I'm not gonna
To
speak for
Tuesday.
Aaron or, you
No,
know,
yeah, we-
Aaron was the city manager at that time, and he never had discussions with me around October, November, looking at any of these. And really, some of this stuff has kind of come out after the fact.
But the thing is, it
But I know
came
that,
out.
right,
And so as it was coming out, you know,
Yeah.
people needed to
and what I say.
disperse the information that was coming out.
What I say comes out after the fact is probably some clearer definitions, because I know, like I put in my email last night, and I think even on one of the attachments you had, that, you know, we're only looking at a time period between April 1st, 2021 and September 30th, 21 of being really eligible to meet some of those definitions. And I think, you know, Paul, to kind of clarify some things, we really never received COVID money specifically COVID money to specifically pay for the 80 hours. I mean, we did get CARES funding, but we used that to reimburse for payroll costs for police and fire. You know, ARPA fund, we used some of that to pay for the hero pay and those kind of things. And then also when we submitted the report, used basically police and fire pay again to absorb up all that money that we received in the first part. But there was never any specific federal money that came out to help us cover this. This is all kind of on our dime.
Which is a lot of money for a small city like us. It's a lot of money
I say it's material.
that could be used for other things that are needed.
So if you'll do that, if you will do that, then we'll try to come up with something.
A correct
And, yeah,
number.
Get a good number. And we'll work on it Tuesday, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Question before you adjourn, just so I have it clarification, I understand. The 88,000 or the 97 or whatever it amounts to when it's finally, that is that is not counted in this 22, that was pre-22, right? Or is
You mean
it-
fiscal year 22?
Fiscal year.
Yeah,
No, it'll have to be counted in this year.
which counted as 22,
Yes.
21, 22.
Yeah, 21, 22 year. We
That's
can,
not recoverable, is what you're saying.
None of it's
in
ever-
policy, is that right?
none of it's recoverable.
Okay,
It's basically on the city's budget.
okay.
Now, we cannot go back prior to June 30, 21, because we've closed that budget year and we've had the audit, so we cannot, I guess anything that we kind of adopt, Brian, needs to start July 1st.
Yeah, and that's what I put in the order.
Okay.
That's also convenient because there's little leave. There's no leave with this before then, and there was only, clearly the leave through December was already authorized. So you only had, I think, 3 employees in January. So
Right,
that's a-
there was 3 in January, and then it
Right, so
went
that
all the
wasn't-
way to August, I think,
Right,
first
that
part of
wasn't
August.
a big,
July or
a
August.
big amount. So then it all picks up in late July, which will all give us fiscal
Right,
year.
yeah.
And then it hit with a vengeance. Then it was
Yeah,
almost like,
unfortunately, a lot of it
I
hits
mean,
after,
it just kept,
unfortunately, a lot of it kind of hits after October 1st, which is
right.
the dead period, or,
You can use the FICA credit for it, potentially.
yeah, I mean, hopefully they'll come out with some language to extend stuff through December 31st maybe, but I doubt it, so.
Motion to adjourn.
So you got enough ammo, get whatever you gotta get done.
We will,
Yeah.
we'll work on
Ammo.
something more for Tuesday.
We're gonna work on a lot for Tuesday.
I need a motion to adjourn.
I just made it.
Need a second.
Second,
All in favor?
I,
Meeting adjourned.
out of here.